This is the Bottom Bins Podcast.
Oh, yeah!
Hello and welcome back to the Bottom Bins Podcast and to a very special episode. This is our 1 year anniversary episode, and I know we're 10 days past the anniversary now, but we just thought, look, jump on and tell you a little bit more about the last year. I know some of you are very avid podcast listeners and do really enjoy and love to interact with us and text us individually or text the Bottom Bins pages, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is. Looking to know when the next episodes are out or even ideas for episodes. So we just thought we would do this. It's a bit of like a year in review and overall really just how we think the last year has gone for the podcast and what you can expect heading into the future, and what you can expect to see from us content wise, and even what you can expect to see from maybe the three of us as individual journalists. So Oren, I'll come to you first, obviously. Well, first off, lads, I mean, happy 1 year anniversary. It's
happy 1 year anniversary, boys.
Yeah, it has been an absolute journey, to be honest. Like, if you can remember, Oren, I want to take you back to the 11th of November 2022. The three of us were sitting outside on the wee cushions on the wee sofas just outside the podcast room, actually waiting for another group to come out of the recording room before we went in. And I remember the three of us sitting around. We all had like our wee notes on our phone, our notes on our pages, and we were like very much going over them and very much being like, right, this is what we need to do. This is the format we need to stick to. And we sort of had ideas for the podcast, but for those sort of first couple of months, Oren, it was very much like, say, I took the presenter role, you guys were very much the analysts, and we literally went game by game. So taking it right back to that first episode, Oren, like, how did you feel going into it, and looking at it as a whole over the last year, how do you think it's gone?
That's a good question. Look, I think we were all very, very nervous going into that podcast studio for the very first time. I know we had done bits and pieces for our courses and stuff, and for our master's course at the time, we had done bits and pieces where we had recorded audio, but, you know, and I remember having a distinct conversation with you, Connor. You know, we lived together last year. I know a lot of our listeners know that. We've lived together a few years, but I remember distinctly having a conversation about, you know, what if, you know, people hate this or people give us shit for this. And it took a lot of encouragement for us to just go, fuck it, to be honest. And, you know, I remember we said, you know, being from a small town, being from a small area where everybody knows everybody and nobody likes to see somebody putting themselves out there. But thankfully, we got a very, very good reaction. And look, that wasn't the be all and end all, but it is one of the things that you have to consider whenever you're starting something new, how it's going to be perceived. Because if it's not perceived well, it's not going to work. But I remember having that conversation. We're all very nervous about, you know, having our face on camera and stuff. And, you know, in the first episode, it wasn't video format. We've evolved so much from that first episode. You know, our structures in that first episode that you just talked about as well. You know, we very much were like, right, it has to be this long, has to be, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da. And the nervousness was in us. You know, you could hear our voice cracking sometimes and whatever because we were so jittery about putting ourselves out there. But, you know, it's over the past year, and it doesn't feel like a year. It's absolutely flew in. We've created content for the past year. We've become more natural as both journalists and content creators for the past year. Our analysis of football games isn't necessarily written down anymore. It's, you know, right off the top of the noggin. And, you know, personally, I have to say I'm very proud of us all, especially as professionals. Because, look, even if this podcast doesn't get thousands and thousands of views yet, it will. But just yet, even though it hasn't, you know, our professional journey and our journalistic career has really improved because of this. And, you know, I would have the confidence now that even for interviews, I'll go and interview anybody. It doesn't bother me anymore. Whereas I would have been quite reserved about it or quite hesitant about it before. However, I'll go and talk about it, no problem. You know, we've had opportunities thrown our way because of this podcast. Not all of them have worked out, and that's absolutely fine. But it's a learning curve. It's a learning curve. And more opportunities will come for us. There'll be better opportunities in the future that we'll be able to take as well. And I am proud of us, really, really proud of us, and happy 1 year to the bottom bins.
Yeah, absolutely, lad. Absolutely. Don't think I could have put that better myself, to be honest. I think the way you worded some of that was lovely, to be honest. Connor, look, a year, 365 days, it's a long time, and we have created sorry, I just have my notes here beside me. So we have created 77 episodes in total. That spans over Premier League content from last year, World Cup content from last year, summer transfer episodes. Then we have episodes with like guests on them. So there was my short series last year that was all about football fans and how they became interactive with their clubs. And then we had perfect preseason over preseason as well, and then building obviously into Premier League content this season as well. Toppled on top of that, you have the Bottom Bins Extra, which is now sort of molded and become just the Bottom Bins. We don't even really call it Bottom Bins Extra anymore, but there's all that content as well. We had some top 15 lists, some top 20 lists. So looking at the content then as a whole, Connor, is there any one particular thing that you think stands out above the rest that you think, do you know what, that's the body of work that I'm most proud of?
That's a tough question. I think as Oren spoke really well there, I think we should be really proud of ourselves because it's not easy to put ourselves out there. Especially I didn't know you lads, before the course, and obviously we became over the year we've become really good mates. And I think as the years went on too, I think you could see we've got naturally better at speaking about football. As you boys said, it was kind of it was kind of robotic at the start, like because you had your notes and you didn't want to say the wrong thing. But as the year went on, I thought we had great crack, and it's just been a great experience, especially for me. I had like no real journalistic experiences, but even now, as Owen said, it's so much easier, to speak to people. Our confidence, I think, all three of us has grown over the year that we had on our course. At the start, I was a bit nervous. Obviously, we all were, but I'm just glad we did it. And do you know what? We've done really well to keep it going as well, because obviously we've all got jobs and responsibilities, and it's tough at times, but it's just great to have that period of time, half an hour to have a good chat. Because we're all good mates and we all love football. That's the main thing, and we can all have a laugh. But yeah, just I thought last year was weird, the World Cup and all being in it. I just really enjoyed just talking about Premier League football with you lads every week. So it's so hard to nail down something, that we did. I know we did a few mini series and stuff like that, but I think I just enjoyed it as a whole, and I think, as you said as well, we should just be proud of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I mean, speaking for myself here personally, over the last year, just when we're talking about that development and that the confidence coming out and stuff, like Owen, I even remember way back in the early days, like you were doing all the editing, all the social media, and that was stuff that I just had absolutely no idea about at all. And I remember me and you sitting down one night, and I like specifically said to you, like, can you please show me like how to edit? You showed me how to edit, and now even like if I'm editing the footage now, like I just feel more confident to like try different things, or like even something as stupid as like making those making the wee vignettes and stuff for us that go over the screen, or the wee vignettes for the photos even that are in our videos. Like that was stuff I just wouldn't have tried before. But I think whenever you start creating content yourself, you actually look at other creators and you're like, oh, I like what they're doing, I kind of like to replicate that. So that's definitely something I think in the past year, maybe that sort of creative freedom, I think in all three of us has definitely come out. And even look, I'm gonna be honest, lads, I'm not trying to blow our own trumpets too much or anything, but like I do think in terms of the most recent content that we've delivered, like our new structure for Premier League content, I think in terms of doing that sort of one game a week, but really deep diving into that one game and really deep diving into the two teams and looking at topics that are even beyond the game itself, I don't think there's coverage out there that kind of matches what we do. I think what we do is very unique. we're going above and beyond what the 90 minutes on the pitch has delivered. We're very much deep diving into the two clubs that we are analysing that particular video or that particular podcast. And even then, I think the Bottom Bins podcast is a bit of a... when I say myth, I don't mean a myth. I mean as in, like, we're very much video content creators as opposed to, like, podcast creators. I think those two lines can be very blurred at times, and I do think we very much fall into the video content. Oren, again, just over the last year, is there similar sort of question to yourself as to what I gave to Connor? Is there any particular body of work, even any particular like shorts or reels or anything you can think of that pop up in your head that you think, wow, that got massive views, I'm really, really proud of that one?
I wouldn't necessarily say there's one video or one piece of content that we produced. However, I'm very proud of our knowledge of social media over the past year and our knowledge of how different trends work when it comes to reels. We've seen some reels hit 30,000 views. We've seen some TikTok videos hit over 30,000, 50,000 views, and we've seen others hit like 300. Do you know what I mean? And dealing with that, I know as Connor said, it has been difficult for us in the last few weeks, especially in the last few months with us all having jobs. And I know personally, I can't apologise enough. I haven't been there enough. I'm not doing enough for the editing. I'm happy to admit that. And kudos to you, Richie. You've really taken on the bulk of the editing in recent times, and fair play to you. We really appreciate it. But our knowledge of it has been fantastic, because for a long period we were producing two or three podcasts a week, as well as maybe 4 or 5 pieces of content online, and that's when we were seeing the bulk of our viewership and stuff. And it is more difficult now that we all have full-time jobs. However, we are slowly getting back into that routine. But I would say I'm most proud. I'm very happy we started this. Do you know what I mean? Even in terms of building the friendships, we got a lot closer because of this podcast as well. There was a lot of different things that maybe we would have been afraid to try before, that we've put ourselves out there on this podcast. And we should all be proud of that. Just our creative knowledge and our creative persona has really, really improved in the past year. And look, that hasn't necessarily came from our journalism courses. That's came from us persevering with what we genuinely believe in. I remember whenever we pitched the idea to each other, let's start a football podcast, we just said, we're going to have a football conversation that we usually have around a dinner table, but we're going to put it online for everybody to see. And that's how we feel this podcast really did become good, because it felt like you're part of the conversation, and we hope it still feels like that. I personally feel, that as a viewer, when I listen back to podcasts, especially podcasts that I'm not in, I feel like I'm involved in that conversation. I love the fact that, we done Richie's pick, we done Conor Dormer's play of the week, we done OD's opinion. Do you know what I mean? Even McCardle's boob of the week at the time. That was fantastic. All that stuff was brilliant, and that was what made us unique. That set us apart from the rest, because I know there was a lot of people who, they would have watched other podcasts, and that's absolutely fine. We watch other podcasts, but that set us apart from the rest, and people were buzzing to see our picks of the week every single week. Do you know what I mean? And I had the opinion of the week. That was so difficult. Every single week thinking of an opinion. So difficult. And I knew for 80 to 90% of the opinions I had, that I was going to get shit for them. And that didn't bother me at all, because it got people talking about the Bottom Bins podcast. And it fully worked. Now, don't get me wrong, there was a couple of ones that I've genuinely believed that were absolute fucking stinkers. But I'm proud of us all. Yeah,
definitely, lad. Definitely. And, even just touching back, even talking about, the picks of the week, it is crazy to think, like that's not even a part of our content anymore. Like, we very much decided at the start of the season, like, we were moving away from that because the podcast format was changing, and there was no point in us doing picks of the week because we couldn't get them. You can't just shoehorn them into Chelsea v Man City, right? Here's your picks of the week, guys. Like, you can't just shoehorn them into episodes that are specific to one game and two particular teams. It wasn't going to work out like that. But that is.
However, if it is something that the viewers would want, it could be a TikTok video every week or
Oh yeah.
something like that, or short.
Absolutely. Like, you could still get your picks of the week out, in some format. But they always did, like, you know yourself, lads. They always did seem to do the best when they were at the end of a podcast. Like, people literally like tuned in. I'd say there was some people that didn't even listen to what we said about the games, just skipped straight to the picks of the week. Connor, just after talking about the high points, I think it's important that sometimes you reflect on some things you've said and maybe reflect on even some of the low points that the podcast has had. Is there anything in particular that your mind that maybe sticks out that you think, oh, that was maybe a more difficult period in time for the podcast?
That's a good question. I thought we got off to like obviously we were nervous, but we got off to a good start with the Premier League content, and then the World Cup came along, and I felt at stages, I wouldn't be the biggest international football fan, to be honest, and I felt at stages where we're just kind of doing it for the sake of doing it, if you know what I mean, just because we had to do it because of the World Cup. But I felt the World Cup at times was very boring and there wasn't much happening. I'd say that was probably the most difficult part. Obviously, when United lose, having to do a podcast is not easy because you get a lot of abuse. That seems to be like, when a lot of my mates would watch it is when United lose because they could just laugh at me. I'm sure it's the same with all of us. But some no point. Yeah, you just get people disagreeing with your opinions and stuff like that. But I don't mind that. I kind of like that. Everybody has their own opinions of football. As Owen said, I felt particularly, bad for you because you had to come up with a new opinion every week, and probably took a lot of flack for it. But sure, that's part of it. Like that's part of football. I like different opinions with other football fans. That's what makes football fun. We've had debates on here about players and teams, but yeah, mostly I think it's been positive, and I think as the season went on, the more knowledge we had, and I think the format change was vital. I know everybody likes to talk about all the teams, but I think it was just a bit too. The podcasts were becoming a bit too long at that stage, and no offense to some of the lower teams. I think a lot of people weren't really interested. And obviously, we didn't have enough time to watch all the games. But mostly, it has been positive. Obviously, I think past the World Cup is when it really picked up. And, United winning the trophy at that stage was nice too. So, yeah, mostly positive. Obviously, you're going to have negatives, as you said, some of the opinions and stuff like that. But I think it's been a really great experience.
Yeah, no, I completely do agree with you, Connor. I think what you said there about the World Cup in particular, like, just like feeling like you had to do it for the sake of doing it. And again, I think that was just because we were such a young podcast. Like, we were actually so afraid at that stage to like take a break and like say, oh no, we'll not do this for a couple of weeks. Like, I remember all three of us being like very religious about like, right, like this has to be out every Wednesday because the minute we like slack off is the minute our viewership will drop and all. And like, really the staying religious, like, staying religious to getting out every Wednesday, at sometimes did do us a hindrance because there were periods in the season where we then actually decided, look, we need to maybe take a break this week because we were all burnt out. Like, and people do think, and I have had people say to me, oh, sure, all you're doing is you're sitting chatting to your mates about football and you've got a mic in your hand. Like, it can't be that difficult. But like, the thing people don't realize is, we actually go research stats for each of those games on those old format podcasts, guys. Like, we used to sit down, have the 10 games listed, and have stats for each of the 10 games so that we actually had stuff that we could talk about more than just, oh yeah, that Liverpool game was great, wasn't it? Like, that's not what constitutes a good football podcast. So we would have had stats, we would have had our research done. Then you take into account the time for editing and promotion on social media. Like, it's a long, like, to get one podcast out, like, could take you anywhere between sort of 2 to 3 hours in total. That includes your recording time as well. Like, so it's it's not just as simple as sitting here with the microphone in your hand and chatting about football. Like, it certainly isn't. Or, and again, similar question to yourself, any sort of moments that stick out in your head where you think to yourself, any particular bad moments that you can think of? Like, the one that sticks in my head in particular, Oren, is I remember me and you being in the car over the summer, and we had just recorded a video. I think it was maybe one of our summer transfer episodes. And I remember us listening back to it and thinking that was a really, really good episode. And our views were trending up the ways at that stage, and we had already started planning for like new season content and really trying to push the viewership on. And this particular episode we did was absolutely fantastic. It was hands down one of our best episodes we had ever done, and it had only like 20 views on YouTube, and we were kind of like, what the hell's going on here? Like, so anything like that sort of stick in your mind at all?
Oh yeah, like look, we've had that period. As Connor said, it started so well. We seen, and this is where my last point comes into play about how our knowledge about social media and stuff has progressed, and our maturity in social media has progressed in the past year. Our first podcast across all platforms got like 1,000 views. Do you know what I mean? And like even our second one, it hit like 500 across all platforms. And then very much after that, I think it was very much people were saying, oh, these guys have tried something, they've put themselves out there. Let's go and see what it's like. It dipped. Then we got video content. It rose again. Rose really high again. Some of our TikToks absolutely exploded. But there has been slumps for us. And it was, it was difficult to comprehend at the time whenever you're seeing other podcasts that, realistically, looking back, our first podcast in comparison to the content we produce now in terms of maturity and naturalness and all that there, it was shite. Do you know what I mean? It was shite. However, it's still our most popular podcast on all of our platforms. And that is annoying for a lot of us, for all of us, sorry, because, the amount of time it does take to not just make a podcast, but the editing, all of that, it's hard to comprehend. However, our maturity has improved in the last year. So yeah, there was a lot of points. I remember sitting in the car with you and being like, what is the point of this? Nobody's watching it, so what is the point? We may as well just give up. And I adopted that that mentality, and I am quite a positive person. And I started to adopt that mentality, and that was a low point for me personally on the podcast, because I was starting to have self-doubt about not just myself, but the podcast as well. However, I feel, especially in the last couple of weeks, we've dedicated more time to it. And we're really coming out of, the slump that we were in. And, we're a year into this. I remember thinking at a time, oh, it'll be 1 or 2 episodes, and then we'll give it a rattle. Whenever university ends, we'll barely see each other, and that'll be the end of it. But we've really fucking kept this routine going. As you said, 77 episodes. That's just episodes. We've probably hundreds of shorts, hundreds of videos between TikTok and, Instagram and all that there. It takes a lot of time. Do you know what I mean? We don't see any revenue from this at the minute, so it's just, it's just our own free time that we're using to do this and provide a service as well. However, more than proud of what we've achieved. But yeah, that would have been the low point. Them kind of slumps and, the self-doubt and the doubt about the podcast. But we're coming out of it. We're definitely coming out of it.
No, absolutely. I mean, it can be a bit disheartening at times, when you've spent, say 3 hours in total, you're recording, you're editing, the creation of your thumbnails, creation of, the actual editing of the videos, and then the time it takes to also upload those videos as well. And, it is annoying sometimes whenever you refresh the play button, or when you, refresh the Spotify for podcasters, and you've only got 12 plays on an episode, and then you go and check the YouTube views and you've maybe only got 12 or 14 plays, and you're kind of like, there's 26 people listening to this. Like, it's this is this really worth 3 hours of my time every week? Like, and yeah, I think they are some low points, but at the same time, I think, listening to a lot of other content creators in the space, it was 2, 3, maybe even 4 years of like grinding before people actually, started seeing significant views. And, if that's what it takes, to just keep chipping away and keep breaking away at the algorithm until you eventually get noticed in a big way, well then so be it, as far as I'm concerned, because our ambition with this podcast was always, and like me and Oren have said it plenty of times when we were living with each other last year, like our ambition was to make this podcast like a full-time job, essentially. Because talking about football and being a football journalist was always something that I know the three of us have always wanted to do, and we've always wanted to cover football in the level that we do. And I think that's the one massive positive overall about the Bottom Bins podcast, is that it does give the three of us the opportunity to do what we love, which is report on football, and report on football in a way that, like as I've already alluded to earlier in the episode, it's beyond the 90 minutes of football that you actually see on the pitch, and it is something different to what other YouTubers or to what other podcasters do offer out there. And that is why, like yourselves, lads, I am just incredibly proud of what we've managed to achieve with this podcast. Connor, looking ahead to the future, then, it's been a year, and looking forward to even maybe, the next year. Is there any sort of goals or aspirations that yourself that you've set, and maybe you're saying to yourself, look, I think that the podcast could maybe head in this direction, or in a year's time I would like to be getting, say, 500 views an episode? Is there anything like that there that you've set for yourself?
Well, of course, like obviously would like to get more viewership and stuff like that, but I think it's just about staying consistent, as you boys keep saying. It's you're gonna have your slumps, you're gonna have your positive moments, you're gonna have your negative moments, but it's just sticking at it. Just keep creating content, because that's what we love to do. As you said, that's the dream job, would be to do this full time, to write about football. That's why we all got into it. That's all why we all wanted to be journalists, especially sport journalists. So it would just be to keep doing it, and just hopefully, just as time goes by, just see the viewers rise. And it's tough, journalism in general is tough, to even get jobs and get experience, but it's just about sticking with it and hoping it'll turn out okay, but yeah, just see the podcast keep growing,
Yeah.
because we're proud of it. And it's not, as you said, it's not easy to do, put yourself out there, and a lot of editing and a lot of hard work. And people think, yeah, it's just an hour a day or just 30 minutes, but then anyone could do it, but it's just to grow and just keep on enjoying it, because I have to admit, I enjoy it as much now as I used, or when we started, if not more, because I feel like we're a lot more honest now, a lot more, we flow a lot better. I just really enjoy doing the podcast.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. I think, people may text you and ask you, oh, like, what do you think's the best episode you've ever done? I always say the most recent, because I always think, with every video, with every episode, you consistently keep getting better and better and better and better. And I do think it will get to a stage, when, our revenues are a wee bit better, and, maybe we do start seeing money for this podcast, that obviously you can start, paying for, professional editing, you can start paying for professional setups. The one thing we all agree on is that someday we would like to have enough money to have a studio, our very own Bottom Bin studio, and that is the dream, really. Obviously we are a wee bit away from that just yet, but that is the eventual dream, really. Or, and again, same question for yourself, any sort of hopes, aspirations that you have moving forward, and where realistically would you like to see the podcast for the 2-year anniversary?
2-year anniversary. Do you know what? As you both said, as long as we keep consistent, I'll be happy. If we're here making another anniversary on a 2-year anniversary, I'll be more than happy with that. Obviously, the viewership will come. Stuff like that will come, and that's down to us as well. We just need to keep it up in the podcast, keep it up in the content that we're making, which we have done, especially in the last 3 or 4 months. A realistic target for me, I would say, if we're hitting between 200 and 500 views per episode, I'd be more than happy with that. Because once you start seeing that, your target for next year, hit between 1,000 and 1,500. Target for next year, between 5,000 and 10,000. Do you know what I mean? And after you see that sort of views, that's when it'll fly. Do you know what I mean? So it's up to us to keep creating content. And look, there is going to be weeks where we might even just be lazy, or we are burnt out or something, and we could be like, do you know what, we can't do it this week. And it's up to us to just keep remembering that that is okay. That is so okay. But in terms of the podcast itself, I'm buzzing with it. And as Connor said, I'm enjoying it as much now as I was at the start. You know, I would hate, like, I remember at the start of the podcast, I was thinking, oh, this is class, we're all getting along and all this here. I would hate to have an episode now where we all play at Happy Families just to put content out. We all have different opinions, and that's what makes this podcast good. That's what makes it like a natural conversation. You don't agree with your mates on every single footballing opinion they've got. You testify their opinions. You fucking have a dick about with them about their opinions. You slag them about their opinions. And that's what we do in this pod. And that's what I love. It's natural. It's a conversation. It's not, oh, this is our opinion, we're forcing it onto you. And we know a couple of ways they can do that. But, yeah, 2nd year anniversary podcast, we'll be here.
Yeah, definitely. And Connor, even the way you worded that there, you know, that you love doing the podcast now just as much as you did way back at the start, and it was an excitement going into uni every week and knowing that it was like a recording day, and that you got through the slog of class, but at the end of the day you were going down to the recording studio, you had your notes and all ready.
You didn't go to fucking class.
What are you all about?
Shorthand.
Why are you going to expose me now, lad?
What are you all already said?
My dad listens to this, lad. I'll be dead. Well, you know what I mean. For you two, you went to class and then you got excited. I normally trounced into uni about 4 o'clock, like, but sure, we'll say that. Still got a master's out of it, lad, so happy days. But yes, boys, just to finish up quickly, one last question to each of you is, Connor, if anybody was listening to this and they were thinking to themselves, oh, I'd actually love to do what them lads do, I'd love to start a podcast with my friends and talk football, what piece of advice would you offer to them?
To just do it. You know, I have to admit, you lads definitely pushed me towards doing the podcast. It was your idea, and you know, I'm glad you asked me to go on it, because as you boys keep saying as well, it gets better because you get more confident, and you know, you're just having a good time with your mates. And as you boys were saying too, it keeps you in contact with your friends, because obviously we're living different lives now. Obviously we've seen each other all the time at uni. We didn't see Richie in class, but we've seen him outside of class. But no, it just keeps us all in contact, and it's really fun to talk about football. And if you're doing something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. That's what they say, and I would agree with that. And we're just doing what we love, and just hoping to keep it growing. And you know, every content creator has to take that step. Nothing's handed to anybody, so you have to just get yourself out there. And I'm glad that the wall did.
Yeah, definitely, lad. Definitely. Everybody does need to take that first step, and it is a daunting first step. Oren, same question to yourself. Any advice you would offer to anybody who was sitting in our position a year ago?
Yeah, what have you got to lose? Just go and do it. What have you got to lose? Oh, if somebody doesn't like it, boo-hoo. They don't have to watch it. Do you know what I mean? There's going to be more. For every one person that dislikes it, there's 2 or 3 that will like it. You've got nothing to lose. Put yourself out there. You'll not regret it. Alright? And if you do, that's the end of it. You don't have to worry about it again. Do you know what I mean? You have nothing to lose. Go and make content. Go and have a bit of crack with your mates. And that's what it is at the end of the day. It's a bit of crack. If the views and all that there comes from it, that's a bonus. But you're putting yourself out there. You're building a portfolio. Go and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for any sort of, like, you know, young person that's interested in journalism or anything, especially, you know, saying that you are one of, you know, say 3 founding members on a podcast that you created and that you do all the work for, you know, it's something that nobody can ever take away from you. You know, that's something that you'll always have on your CV, or it's always something that, you know, in an interview you can talk about, and it does help open up new experiences to you. Like, even lads, you think of some of the people we've got to chat to because of the podcast, like some of the industry professionals that we've been able to speak to through, you know, doing this podcast, and some of the advice that they've managed to offer us. You know, that's 5 minutes of a chat that people would either, number one, pay for, or number two, would absolutely kill to have. And you know, just because we were in this space, we just so managed to grab 5 minutes of these industry leaders' time, and that's something special, and that's something that you do carry with you for the rest of your content creation life. But yeah, I think that's going to do it. That's 1 year of the Bottom Bins podcast, folks. Bit of a different episode this week. No football to be chatted about. We just thought we would run through the last year and talk about our highs and lows, and where we want to go with this, and hopefully you as a listener have enjoyed the last year of content. And if you're a new listener, if you've only listened to the last episode, please stick around, because we'd love to have you as part of the community. Please give us a follow on Facebook. It is the Bottom Bins Podcast. We are at Bottom Bins Pod. That's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Listen, guys, there is so much content over there. So even if this is your first episode or your second episode, go and check those pages out. Give us a follow, give us a like, and go and check out all the content that you've missed over the last year, because there's plenty to get caught up on. And as always, keep a bottom bins.
Keep a bottom bins.
Bottom ends.